Let's try this. Got kind of an icky stuff. I'm always complaining, aren't I? Okay, let's see. Still on chapter 1, I think, aren't we? You go back to the last paragraph, I think. I remained standing on the spot where he had left me, unwilling to depart, yet unknowing why I should loiter there. I looked wistfully into the street we had lately quitted, and after a time I directed my steps that way. I passed and repassed the house and stopped and listened at the door. All was dark and silent as the grave. Yet I lingered about and could not tear myself away, thinking of all possible harm that might happen to the child, of fires and robberies and even murder, and feeling as if some evil must ensue if I turned my back upon the place. The closing of a door or window in the street brought me before the curiosity dealers once more. I crossed the road and looked up at the house to assure myself that the noise had not come from there. No, it was black, cold, and lifeless as before. There were few passers astir. The street was sad and dismal and pretty well my own. A few stragglers from the theaters hurried by, and now and then I turned aside to avoid some noisy drunkard as he reeled homewards. But these interruptions were not frequent and soon ceased. The clocks struck 1. Still I paced up and down, promising myself that every time should be the last, and breaking faith with myself on some new plea as often as I did so. The more I thought of what the old man had said and of his looks and bearing, the less I could account for what I had seen and heard. I had a strong misgiving that his nightly absence was for no good purpose. I had only come to know the fact through the innocence of the child, and though the old man was by at the time and saw my undisguised surprise, he had preserved a strange mystery upon the subject and offered no words of explanation. These reflections naturally recalled again more strongly than before his haggard face, his wandering manner, his restless, anxious looks. His affection for the child might not be inconsistent with villainy of the worst kind. Even that very affection was in itself an extraordinary contradiction. Or how could he leave her thus? Disposed as I was to think badly of him, I never doubted that his love for her was real. I could not admit the thought, remembering what had passed between us and the tone of voice in which he had called her by her name. "Stay here, of course," the child had said in answer to my question. "I always do." What could take him from home by night and every night? I called up all the strange tales I had ever heard of dark and secret deeds committed in great towns, and escaping detection for a long series of years. Wild as many of those stories were, these stories, I could not find one adapted to this mystery. Excuse me. I'm always itching when I'm trying to read. Which only became the more impenetrable in proportion as I sought to solve it. Occupied with such thoughts as these, and a crowd of others all tending to the same point, I continued to pace the street for 2 long hours. At length the rain began to descend heavily, and then, overpowered by fatigue, though no less interested than I had been at first, I engaged the nearest coach and so got home. A cheerful fire was blazing on the hearth. The lamp burnt brightly. My clock received me with its old familiar welcome. Everything was quiet, warm, and cheering, and in happy contrast to the gloom and darkness I had quitted. But all that night, waking or in my sleep, the same thoughts recurred and the same images retained possession of my brain. I had ever before me the old dark murky rooms, the gaunt suits of mail with their ghostly silent air, the faces all awry, grinning from wood and stone, the dust and rust and worm that lives in wood, and alone in the midst of all this lumber and decay and ugly age, the beautiful child, in her gentle slumber, smiling through her light and sunny dreams. And that's it for chapter 1. Sorry, there was a blank page. I wasn't sure what was going on with that. Chapter 2. After combating for nearly a week the feeling which impelled me to revisit the place I had quitted under the circumstances already detailed, I yielded to it at length, and determining that this time I would present myself by the light of day, bent my steps thither early in the morning. I walked past the house and took several turns in the street with that kind of hesitation which is natural to a man who is conscious that the visit he is about to pay is unexpected and may not be very acceptable. However, as the door of the shop was shut, and it did not appear likely that I should be recognized by those within, if I continued merely to pass up and down before it, I soon conquered this irresolution and found myself in the curiosity dealer's warehouse. The old man and another person were together in the back part, and there seemed to have been high words between them, for their voices were raised to a very high pitch, suddenly stopped on my entering, and the old man, advancing hastily towards me, said in a tremulous tone that he was very glad I had come. "You interrupted us at a critical moment," said he, pointing to the man whom I found in company with him. "This fellow will murder me one of these days. He would have done so long ago if he dared." "Bah! You would swear away my life if you could," returned the other, after bestowing a stare and a frown on me. "We all know that." "I almost think I could," cried the old man, turning feebly upon him. "If oaths or prayers or words could rid me of you, they should. I would be quit of you and would be relieved if you were dead." Whoa. "I know it," returned the other. "I said so, didn't I? But neither oaths or prayers nor words will kill me, and therefore I live and mean to live." And his mother died," cried the old man, passionately clasping his hands and looking upward, "and this is heaven's justice?" The other stood lounging with his foot upon a chair and regarded him with a contemptuous sneer. He was a young man of 21 or thereabouts, well made and certainly handsome, though the expression of his face was far from prepossessing, having in common with his manner and even his dress a dissipated, insolent air which repelled one. "Justice or no justice," said the young fellow, "here I am, and here I shall stop, till such time as I think fit to go, unless you send for assistance to put me out, which you won't do, I know. I tell you again that I want to see my sister." "Your sister," said the old man bitterly. "Ah, you can't change the relationship," returned the other. "If you could, you'd have done it long ago. I want to see my sister, that you keep cooped up here, poisoning her mind with your sly secrets, and pretending an affection for her that you may work her to death and add a few scraped shillings every week to the money you can hardly count. I want to see her, and I will. Here's a moralist to talk of poisoned minds. Here's a generous spirit to scorn scraped-up shillings," cried the old man, turning from him to me. "A profligate, sir, who has forfeited every claim not only upon those who have the misfortune to be of his blood." but upon society which knows nothing of him but his misdeeds. A liar, too," he added in a lower voice as he drew closer to me, "who knows how dear she is to me, and seeks to wound me even there because there is a stranger nearby." "Strangers are nothing to me, grandfather," said the young fellow, catching at the word, "nor I to them, I hope. The best they can do is to keep an eye to their business and leave me to mine. There's a friend of mine waiting outside, and as it seems I may have to wait some time, I'll call him in with your leave." Saying this, he stepped to the door and, looking down the street, beckoned several times to some unseen person, who, to judge from the air of impatience with which these signals were accompanied, required a great quantity of persuasion to induce him to advance. At length there sauntered up on the opposite side of the way, with a bad pretense of passing by accident, a figure conspicuous for its dirty smartness, which, after a great many frowns and jerks of the head and resistance of the invitation, ultimately crossed the road and was brought into the shop. "There, it's Dick Swiveller," said the young fellow, pushing him in. "Sit down, Swiveller." But is the old men agreeable? M.I.N. said Mr. Swiveller in an undertone. Mr. Swiveller complied and looked about him with a propitiatory smile. Observed that last week was a fine week for the ducks, and this week was a fine week for the dust. He also observed that while standing by the post at the street corner, he had observed a pig with a straw in his mouth issuing out of the tobacco shop, from which appearance he augured that another fine week for the ducks was approaching, and that rain would certainly ensue. He furthermore took occasion to apologize for any negligence that might be perceptible in his dress, on the ground that last night he had had the sun very strong in his eyes, by which expression he was understood to convey to his hearers, in the most delicate manner possible, the information that he had been extremely drunk. "But what," said Mr. Swiveller with a sigh, "what is the odds, so long as the fire of soul is kindled at the taper of conviviality, and the wing of friendship never molts a feather? What is the odds, so long as the spirit is expanded by means of rosy wine, and the present moment is the least happiest of our existence?" "You needn't act the chairman here," said the friend, half aside. "Fred," cried Mr. Swiveller, tapping his nose, "a word to the wise is sufficient for them. We may be good and happy without riches, Fred." "Say not another syllable. I know my cue. Smart is the word. Only one little whisper, Fred. Is the old men friendly?" Again it's spelled M-I-N. "Never you mind," replied his friend. "Right again, quite right," said Mr. Swiveller. "Caution is the word, and caution is the act. With that," he winked as if perseveration of some deep secret, and folding his arms and leaning back in his chair, looked up at the ceiling with profound gravity. It was perhaps not very unreasonable to suspect, from what had already passed, that Mr. Swiveller was not quite recovered from the effects of the powerful sunlight to which he had made allusion. But if no suspicion had been awakened by his speech, his wiry hair, dull eyes, and sallow face would still have been strong witnesses against him. His attire was not, as he had himself hinted, remarkable for the nicest arrangement, but was in a state of disorder which strongly induced the idea that he had gone to bed in it. It consisted of a brown body coat with a great many brass buttons up the front and only one behind, a bright check neckerchief, a plaid waistcoat, soiled white trousers, and a very limp hat, worn with the wrong side foremost to hide a hole in the brim. The breast of his coat was ornamented with an outside pocket from which there peeped forth the cleanest end of a very large and very ill-favored handkerchief. His dirty wristbands were pulled on as far as possible and ostentatiously folded back over his cuffs. He displayed no gloves and carried a yellow cane having at the top a bone hand with the semblance of a ring on its little finger and a black ball in its grasp. With all these personal advantages, in parentheses, to which may be added a strong savor of tobacco smoke and a prevailing greasiness of appearance, end of parentheses. I say quote, parentheses. Mr. Swiveller leant back in his chair with his eyes fixed on the ceiling and occasionally pitching his voice to the needful key, obliged the company with a few bars of an intensely dismal air, and then in the middle of a note relapsed into his former silence. The old man set himself down in a chair and with folded hands looked sometimes at his grandson and sometimes at his strange companion as if he were utterly powerless and had no resource but to leave them to do as they pleased. The young man reclined against a table at no great distance from his friend, in apparent indifference to everything that had passed, and I, who felt the difficulty of any interference, notwithstanding that the old man had appealed to me both by words and looks, made the best feint I could of being occupied in examining some of the goods that were disposed for sale and paying very little attention to a person before me. The silence was not of long duration, for Mr. Swiveller, after favoring us with several melodious assurances that his heart was in the Highlands, that he wanted but his Arab steed as a preliminary to the achievement of great feats of valor and loyalty, removed his eyes from the ceiling and subsided into prose again. And I'm going to stop right there. Oh, y'all, please pray. I'm starting to get a little sore throat again. Earlier today, I had a tickly throat, stomach, blah. I shouldn't show you this because this is the fiber for tomorrow. Had a $10 voucher, so off to Michael's I go. You know, we're supposed to be casting on socks, as if I don't already have a bunch of sock yarn. This kind of looks like, but not really. Never mind. I was starting to say it kind of looks like what I got, the last millions I got, but it kind of doesn't. And the girl that checked me out and I both were thinking that the color looked, this is purple. May look blue, I don't know. I think there may be a little blue in there too. But anyway, it kind of reminded us of a vineyard or grapevine or something, but it's called Born, I think the name is Born to Run. Good name for sock yarn though, Born to Run. And I was showing y'all these cute little 9-inch needles. So I may try to find all these projects I got that I have on the go already. I'm going to get back to this bag. And of course, I still have to finish my little vest. The ring around the rosy vest. You know, this one. I really do love this. It's really cute and easy. And it looks cute too. It's turning out good. Except for that doggone extra little ruffles I have in one part. Oh, I get sleepy with my counting, and then my count doesn't come out exactly right. And I even have row counters and make notes and whatever. Anyway, say a little prayer if you would for me that I'm not getting sick. Certainly not the sea. I don't feel that bad, but you know. Ding, ding. It's going to be 8 o'clock. Ooh, it's time to go to Liz's for bingo, Zingo. Bye. Be sweet, don't be ugly. Bye-bye.